This is Dunnottar Castle.
You may remember it from such films as Hamlet, Mary Queen of Scots, and Brave, as well as many Instagram reels.
But there's a lot more to it than just how it looks. It has a history that includes kings, Vikings, a massacre, a siege, and a jewel heist. Welcome to Scotland Unplugged, and a castle that's seen the Picts, the Jacobites, and maybe even William Wallace. This video is going to be a little bit different from the ones I normally do. Normally they're quite tight, quite scripted. I haven't been here before, I haven't had a look around. You're going to come in with me and check it out at the same time I do. Let's go.
Dunnottar Castle lies on the east coast, near Stonehaven, on a 160-foot high rock, surrounded on three sides by the North Sea. It's just over a 2-hour drive from Edinburgh on a sunny Tuesday morning in March. The word Dunnottar translates as something like fort on the shelving slope. Pretty accurate.
Legend has it that St Ninian founded a chapel here in the 5th century, but there's zero evidence for that at all. The University of Aberdeen did find evidence for a Pictish presence sometime between 5000 BC and 700 AD in this area. The earliest written records we have are from the Annals of Ulster, talking about sieges at Dunnottar, which may or may not be here, in 681 and 694.
Apologies for the terrible pronunciation.
The castle sits on an area called the Mearns, where the Grampian Mountains come quite close to the sea, so it's a bit of a pinch point.
And that made it strategically important. You enter through a gate that would have included a portcullis, then climb the steps, past the place the 5th Earl kept a pet lion until his wife made him get rid of it, and on to a grand 16th century gatehouse. Inside you'll find a model of the castle as it would have appeared, and a view. You can also see some of the stuff that's been found here down the years, like these cannon and musket balls and clay pipes. From there you head on up some more steps, past William Wallace's postern. Posterns were small back entrances that allowed soldiers to come and go quietly. And it's possible Wallace used this one against the castle when he entered in 1297. These days it's a wishing well, and it's regularly emptied, with the proceeds going to charity.
In the year 900, the Vikings came here. They killed Donald II, the first man to be styled King of Alapa, and then in true Viking style they ransacked the place.
In 934, Constantine II was besieged here for a month by Aethelstan, King of England. But that was nothing. This is the keep, the oldest part of the castle still standing today, and it earned its builder some grief.
So this is the Great Hall in the keep. Dunnottar was property of the Keiths from the 14th century, and they became the Earl Marshals of Scotland, responsible for keeping the honours of Scotland, Scotland's crown jewels, in 1392. The only problem was that Sir William Keith built this on consecrated ground and earned himself an excommunication. And in 1395, the Pope had to intervene. This part here is the Great Hall. This is where everybody would have gathered, and off here were family apartments. It's crazy when you see all the little rooms up there. Up there you can see kind of areas for sitting and just separate rooms. It's really quite something. So this would have been the kitchen, the proper engine of the castle. Check out the size of that fireplace. People lived on a lot of carbs in those days. Unlike me at the moment, it seems. So this would have been the smithy or the blacksmith. If you think about it, quite a lot of metal work was involved in those days. If you wanted cannonballs or shot or door hinges or shoes for the horses in the stables over there, or armour, or basically anything you'd broken or worn out. Come to think of it, I could probably do with one of those myself. I can only imagine the heat going up that chimney. The stables are pretty big. You don't automatically think of horses being in a place like this, which feels quite disconnected from the land, but the Earl Marshal would have had a lot of estate land that he would have had to travel to keep in order, and also he would have been required to be in regular attendance with the king. This is the chapel. It was consecrated in 1276. And according to Blind Harry, it was the scene of the castle's bloodiest episode. In 1297, Edward I, aka Edward the Longshank's English army invaded and garrisoned the castle, and William Wallace was apparently having none of it. According to Harry, Wallace laid siege to the castle. He burned the wooden walls and then imprisoned 4,000 English soldiers in the chapel, and burned that to the ground. Might have been a bit strong. It also might never have happened. Blind Harry was writing about 170-ish years after William Wallace's death. He was also a travelling minstrel, telling stories to the great and the good, and would have attempted to flatter them in any way he possibly could have, including their castles and their families in the stories. He claimed to have based his writing on the work of John Blair, who was supposedly Wallace's chaplain and chronicler. But if John Blair's writing ever existed, it doesn't anymore. A lot of what Harry wrote is quite fantastical, much like the film it inspired. These are the more modern apartments from the 16th and 17th century, but their history is no less eventful. This would have been the dining room. You could just about fit my family around a table in here, although it might get loud. Probably the biggest and most famous drama for the castle came in 1651. Following his victory at the Battle of Dunbar, Oliver Cromwell invaded Scotland. He'd already destroyed the English crown jewels and wanted the honours of Scotland, our crown jewels too. Cromwell's troops laid siege to the castle for 8 months, but he didn't get his hands on those lovely jewels because he hadn't reckoned on Christian Fletcher, a local minister's wife, who, depending on whichever story you believe, either smuggled them out of a window onto the shore and put them in a creel full of seaweed, or just walked straight past the guards with them hidden in bags. This is the Countess's suite. Very nice. Windows on both sides so she can keep an eye on what's going on in here and out there. Ideal. This is the Earl's room. This is his actual bedroom. Through there's a reception room. And you can still see some of the plaster, or some of the remnants of the plaster on the walls. Charles II stayed here when he visited, suggesting it was probably the most comfortable room in the castle. Notably, no windows to the inside of the castle, so he didn't care so much about what was going on inside. Tells you who was in charge. It's a beautiful sunny day today, and the sea's a crazy shade of blue. Makes you wonder what it's like on a dreich day though. This is probably the darkest bit of the castle's history that we know to be true. This is the Whigs' vault. In 1685, 167 Covenanters were imprisoned here for refusing to acknowledge Charles II's religious reforms. So the sign here says that 200 people were marched to Dunnottar, of which 122 men and 45 women survived the journey. They were thrown into the infamous Whigs' vault, this place, ankle deep in mire and held for 6 weeks with no sanitation. Both food and water had to be bought from the guards. It says that 25 men escaped and 2 of them fell to their deaths. Not surprisingly, 15 of them were recaptured and tortured. The prisoners that remained were put on a boat and transported to New Jersey, and only about 70 of them survived the voyage. One of the darker periods in Scottish history. In fact, a couple of my own ancestors were Covenanters. My 8 times great uncle was hanged as one of the Wigtown martyrs, and my 7 times great grandfather nearly lost his ears and got transported to the Caribbean and sold into indentured servitude. You'll understand if I don't hang around. On a more cheerful note, this is the brewery. People drank quite a lot of beer in the 16th and 17th century, mainly because drinking water was a little bit too hazardous, and the process of brewing killed a lot of the bacteria. So apparently this area has some resident ghosts. There's a tall Scandinavian man who can be seen looking out to sea, a small deerhound, and a woman in a green plaid who hangs around this area behind me, the bread oven, a much later, newer, swankier bread oven, and searching for her lost children. Some believe she's a Pictish woman whose children converted to Christianity. This is definitely the spookiest part of the castle. This is the thieves' hole. So if you were caught stealing valuable commodities like, I don't know, bread or beer, this is where you wound up for a few days. You'd probably think twice about stealing again. I'll think twice about going in there again because I just cracked my head off the top of the door. You know it's a sore one when your neck hurts. So this is the cistern. This would have been the water supply for the whole castle. When they last excavated it, they discovered it was 7.6 metres deep. And in there they found 4 brass pans, a bunch of cannonballs, part of a Dutch pot, and a small French sword. This is the West Range, and it's thought it contained important staff members' lodgings, and on the top floor, a ballroom where all the lords and ladies of the day would dance to popular tunes of the time. Up there off the doorway behind me, there would have been a balcony with views to the sea. Very swanky, but I don't know if I'd fancy it on a windy night. George Keith, the 10th Earl Marshal, played a leading role in the 1715 Jacobite uprising, which didn't go quite according to plan, and he wound up forfeiting his lands and titles. He managed to flee to the continent and actually became the ambassador to France for Frederick the Great of Prussia.
The Earl had landed on his feet, but his castle fell into disrepair.
Then it was bought by the York Building Company and the interiors were stripped, which is how it wound up looking the way it does today. I mean, it still looks incredible. I need to explore a lot more of the Aberdeenshire coast. New Slains Castle really blew me away, partly because of its connection to Dracula, but just because of the sheer presence of it. But this is another level. Onwards and upwards.